We can't go in here.
Come on, Casey, you're with me. Be brave.
Has the entire faculty been commuted?
Almost.
I have a pain. Right here.
Hey guys, what's happening? Nihat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we'll be taking a look at the 1998 teen horror flick, The Faculty. The brainchild of guerrilla filmmaker Robert Rodriguez, who brought us Desperado, From Dusk Till Dawn, Sin City, and Planet Terror, and slasher film baron Kevin Williamson. The Faculty is a peculiar blend of The Thing, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Aliens, The Breakfast Club, and Varsity Blues. Functioning as a teen satire that uses its sci-fi elements to exploit our paranoia about high school, the all too familiar hierarchical structures, and our desire to belong. Featuring a star-studded cast including Robert Patrick, Salma Hayek, Famke Janssen, Elijah Wood, Josh Hartnett, Jon Stewart, Clea Duvall, Piper Laurie, and Usher Raymond. The Faculty is a teen horror set in a high school where a group of unlikely heroes team up against an alien that threatens to take over their school. These archetypal characters include the egghead school photographer Casey, who is at the mercy of school bullies, the black-wearing misfit Stokely, the smart-aleck drug pusher Zeke, student magazine editor Delilah, the conflicted jock Stan, and the Southern Belle new girl, Mary Beth. After discovering the teaching staff at their high school had been taken over by squid-like alien parasites that drained their human hosts to survive, the teens form an unlikely and often strained bond to battle the threat. As the epidemic begins spreading amongst students, families, and even the police who started functioning as enforcers for their alien overlords, Rodriguez cleverly builds up the growing paranoia, before increasing horror-gore elements as they begin suspecting that the alien was among them. This leads to a great comedic replay of the infamous blood test scene from The Thing, with the teens snorting homemade candy filled with caffeine to flush the parasites out. Coming off the heels of his commercially successful Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream 2, and Halloween H2O, screenwriter on the rise Kevin Williamson was poised to make another teenage horror hit. While the speculative script for The Faculty was written in 1990 by David Wetter and Bruce Kimmel, after Miramax stumbled onto the script and purchased it in 1995, Williamson was brought on to do rewrites. Keeping the basic story but rewriting the dialogue, adding more characters, and changing the characteristics of the alien parasites, Williamson altered the film to be more suited to teenage audiences. Though he was initially set to direct the picture in his directorial debut, he forfeited this opportunity in favour of directing another script he had written titled Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which was released the following year and bombed at the box office.
I made a decision and it was wrong. It was a bad call, Ripley.
Robert Rodriguez, who is known as being a very hands-on director that is heavily involved in producing, shooting, editing, and even scoring many of his films, was then hired to direct The Faculty in 1996, right after the release of his outstanding genre bender, From Dusk Till Dawn. With a modest budget of $15 million, considering the cast and special effects used in the film, Rodriguez was able to summon more money for the project by shooting a bunch of strange Tommy Hilfiger commercials featuring the principal cast, which you can find on the internet. While the story is set in the fictional town of Harrington, Ohio, the majority of The Faculty was shot in Texas across Austin, San Marcos, Dallas, and Lockhart over 3 months in early 1997. The film begins with a football training session where the coach, Joe Willis, played by Robert Patrick, is yelling at the players for their lack of intensity and focus. His admonishment, fueled with anger and vitriol, leads to him flipping a nearby bench and kicking everything around him, including a burst sprinkler, moments before he was approached by an unseen figure. This scene basically serves two purposes. It shows the moment that the first person at the school was infected, but it's also used to highlight the significant change in the personality of Willis, who goes from being a fired-up football coach to a calm yet malevolent host of the alien parasite. This is then followed by a staff meeting at the high school, where several teachers and the principal are having heated discussions about the allocation of school budget funds. After the meeting is finished, Principal Drake returns to her office to retrieve her keys and is stopped by Coach Willis, who prevented her from leaving by impulsively stabbing a pencil through her hand and holding her back. Though she manages to get past him and reach the front door to the school, she finds it chained up and begs Mrs. Olsen, the drama teacher who was outside, to wait for her while she found the keys. Willis continues to terrorize the principal in a menacing performance that would make the T-1000 proud, but Drake is ultimately able to find her keys and unlock the chain, only to be stabbed to death outside by Mrs. Olsen, who, like Willis, showed no emotion or remorse, indicating that she had also been infected by a parasite. This scene follows the same recipe of Williamson's previous films that were heavily inspired by the slasher genre, but after this point we lose much of the horror elements, which was a bit disappointing. The following morning, we get an introduction to the film's 6 protagonists: Casey Connor, the dedicated and geeky photographer for the school newspaper, followed by the spiteful and vain Delilah Prophet, the paper's editor-in-chief and head cheerleader, who loved putting other students down, including her own boyfriend and team captain, Stan Rosado, who was contemplating quitting the football team to focus on his education. We also meet Zeke Taylor, an intelligent yet rebellious student repeating his senior year, known for selling powdered caffeine, which he tricked people into thinking were drugs. Stokely Mitchell, a nihilistic teenager that had a crush on Stan, and Mary Beth Hutchinson, a naive transfer student from Atlanta that begins developing a crush on Zeke and harbored a sinister secret.
Feel pretty alien myself today.
While eating lunch on the football field, Casey notices a strange creature in the grass and takes it to his science teacher, Mr. Furlong. Though they initially presume it to be dead, its resuscitation upon coming into contact with water leads Furlong to suspect that it might be a new cephalopod-like pelagic organism belonging to the Mesozoan family. While the Mesozoa found on Earth are minuscule worm-like parasites of marine invertebrates, the parasite in the film, which I've dubbed the Hydra facultites, were fish-like aquatic creatures that possessed tentacles, mandibles on the head, and a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth.
Jesus.
Wanting to find a new story for the front page of the school's paper, Delilah convinces Casey to break into the staff lounge with her in the interest of uncovering any secrets the teachers might have. It's important to note that Delilah isn't really interested in breaking news that had any substance, but merely desired to create a gossipy, sensationalist article. I mean, she even ignores Casey when he suggested they talk about a potentially new species he had accidentally discovered. Hiding in the closet after hearing Mrs. Olsen and Willis approach the door, they overhear both teachers talking about their efforts to infect the faculty and students. This whole scene was a bit silly, as the discovery Casey made had the potential to reach state and national papers, and her decision to ignore his suggestion felt like a contrived effort to get both characters in the closet to facilitate the story. Now, both Casey and Delilah see the two teachers drinking plenty of water during their conversation, and also witness Mrs. Olsen uncharacteristically throwing water on her face, before Miss Harper, the school's nurse, walked into the room. As Harper began gathering her things to go home, Olsen locked the door and the two began attacking her by forcing one of the parasites into her ear. These alien parasites could duplicate themselves provided they had a water source to power the process, which they found in the bodies of their hosts. This essentially took the pressure off the Queen, who was the progenitor of the species, and allowed her to maintain anonymity while her drones did the work. The creatures also possessed remarkable regenerative powers, as witnessed with the specimen that was brought back to life upon coming into contact with water, and this trait was also passed on to the host. We see a great example of this with the coach, who had suffered a deep cut to his face when attacking Principal Drake, which healed up after one day, and more miraculously, Principal Drake, who was stabbed a number of times and recovered from severe injuries in no time. Shocked by a combination of what they saw the teachers do and their finding of Mrs. Brummel's corpse in the closet, whose infected body couldn't handle the transformation, the two teens make a dash out of the school, with Casey later notifying police of what they had witnessed. Unfortunately, by the time that Casey returned with the police and his parents, the faculty had all been converted, and we'd see them pretend as though there was a misunderstanding. The reason all the teachers were on the same page at all times was because they were telepathically connected to their queen, who dictated their actions, and this connection was also shared amongst each of the infected. Their dependence on the queen would, however, be their inevitable downfall, as her death would mean a disruption in their telepathic connection, enabling the infected to return back to normal. One of the officers then accompanies the principal into her office to call Mrs. Brummel and Miss Harper to corroborate their story, but he's attacked and infected by her. This in turn leads to the infection of the entire police force, who later begin acting as enforcers for the Queen, creating roadblocks and infecting any people that were planning on leaving town. The following day, the faculty begin their process of infecting the students by calling them individually to the nurse's office, under the pretense of them getting an ear exam. This is also facilitated by the police, who assisted in the infection process. Casey, Stokely, and Zeke begin noticing that the students and teachers were acting strangely, with many of them lining up in drones at the drink fountains. Casey then asks Stokely for an opinion on a theory he developed about the teachers and students being under the control of something, and in an on-the-nose reference, she tells him that it sounded like the plot of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. They, along with Delilah and Stan, then begin discussing the odd behavior of everyone around them, which is overheard by Zeke and Mary Beth from outside. While most of them had noticed strange things, they refused to believe Casey's theory about aliens controlling the teachers. It's not until the arrival of Mr. Furlong, who was told about their suspicions and proceeded to attack them, that they began to realize that Casey may have been onto something. During the ensuing struggle, Furlong attempts to infect Zeke, but the teen stabs him in the eye with a caffeine-filled pen, which leads to his death. This was because the aliens couldn't survive without water, and with the introduction of high levels of caffeine into Furlong's body, the diuretic essentially dried the organism out and killed it. After their confrontation with Furlong, the group decide to leave and hide at Zeke's place, where they uncover how the parasites functioned and also develop a theory about how the infected might have been controlled by a queen. Realizing that any one of them could have been infected, they begin taking the caffeinated mixture to prove that they were still human, where it's revealed that Delilah was infected. The group's numbers then began to dwindle as they got overwhelmed by the infected faculty and students. This is followed by the revelation that Mary Beth was actually the Queen all along, who also revealed her true monstrous form, leaving Casey and Zeke to team up and take her out. It's here that Mary Beth explained her species were native to a planet composed entirely of oceans, but after a cataclysmic event that saw their waters dry up, the Queen decided to travel the cosmos in search of a new home, finally arriving on Earth before she began her takeover of Harrington. Though Mary Beth managed to knock Zeke out by hurling him into several lockers, Casey is able to lure her into the retracting bleachers and trap her, before stabbing a handful of caffeinated pens into her face, ultimately killing her and returning Harrington to a state of normality.
Guaranteed to jack you up.
The film then picks up a month later, where we find Stan and Stokely were now dating, as were Delilah and Casey, who is now considered to be a local hero, after Delilah wrote a feature article in the school paper about him saving the school. I personally didn't think this pairing made much sense, as throughout the film Delilah was very selfish, in contrast to Casey, who did everything he could to help others. But what surprised me most was seeing Zeke on the football team. Nothing in the film suggested that this is something that he wanted. In fact, his comments throughout the movie inferred that he was likely the smartest student there. So it would have been nice to have seen him leading the science club or helping Stan become a better student, which would have given him a stronger character arc. Well, that's all for today, folks. A big thanks to all of you guys who requested we take a look at the faculty. Don't forget to hit subscribe and click the notification icon to stay up to date on all my content. And if there's anything else you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Nihat here with Film and Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
What are you doing?
I was just eating my lunch, sir.
You're not really into sports.
I don't think a person should run unless he's being chased.
Being chased?